Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our first DCRI Research Conference for the year. It's a real pleasure to have a distinguished speaker today as part of the Duke Center of Cardiovascular Medicine celebrations.
Did you say distinguished?
Distinguished. Distinguished. I'm going to stand by that.
Extinguished.
So, for all of us, the tripartite mission of academic medical centers of excellence in research, clinical care, and education is challenging. And various centers across the country experience different influences from their local contexts. And today we have the real pleasure of hearing about the experience of one of our own who left in 2012 to Stanford, where he became the Arthur Bloomfield Professor of Medicine and Chair of the Department of Medicine. That was after almost 20 years here at Duke, where he started as a cardiovascular fellow and trained here in research, and then joined the junior faculty, where he rose through the ranks after a number of distinguished accomplishments. He's an international and national leader in cardiovascular medicine, specifically with research interests in antithrombotic therapy for acute coronary syndromes, as well as a number of other related clinical and policy activities. He's commonly on the committees for American Heart Association, ACC, and holds a number of leadership positions across a number of clinical trials. And after leaving us, we have the distinguished pleasure of hearing from his current experience transforming the Department of Medicine at Stanford with lessons that may be very relevant to us as we seek to get through these challenging times. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Bob Harrington.
Thank you. Thanks, Abdul. Certainly, it's a pleasure and honor to be back, and I noticed that the more things change, things remain unchanged as well. I think Dr. Califf has been in that seat for about 15 years. I'll try to take up most of the time so I don't have to have the obligatory 2 questions. So what we're going to talk about here is what we've been doing over the course of the last couple of years at Stanford. I love being able to disclose now that I'm paid from Duke for some of my research activities, and at the same time being paid from the Timmy Group at Harvard, one of our longtime competitors. So I'm going to try to cover a lot, and that for those of you who have had me listen to me talk in this room over the years, I like to cover a lot, and so we'll go through things quickly. I want to talk about what we're doing in the Stanford Department of Medicine. I'm actually not going to talk about the societal background, because you know this. You guys are the best in the world at studying some of these issues. But I'll talk about our Department of Medicine, which is a little bit of an unusual Department of Medicine in terms of our makeup. We'll talk about the things we've been working on, including building an integrated regional healthcare system in the Greater Bay Area in Northern California. We'll talk about science to patients, the quantitative sciences, population health, and then we'll give you some personal reflections of the kind of things that we're enjoying doing while we're there in Northern California. So while I was looking at the job at Stanford, they had commissioned an external review of the department. And as part of having me look at the department, along with a number of other people, they provided us a review of really a SWOT analysis of what were both the challenges and the potential opportunities to do some things at Stanford. So this was the 2011 review of the Department of Medicine. Great people, great research, innovative and creative culture, some, and unfortunately a limited number of excellent clinical programs, a residency program that had been a terrific residency program but was in a bit of a decline, and a strength around the fact that this is a small medical school on a relatively small campus, and we're one of the unusual academic medical centers in that everything, including 2 hospitals, an adult hospital and pediatric hospital, are located right in the middle of campus. But there were also challenges. There was a lot of leadership turnover. In the last 15 years, I've had 7 predecessors. I like to point out that in July, I've now survived close to the average survival of the last 7 chairs of medicine at Stanford. There had been challenges with faculty morale, compensation, a lot of the kind of stuff that you might understand. But there was huge opportunities, and the External Review Board put forward some of those opportunities. They said, we need a vision to transform the department. We need to bring unity. There were a lot of great people, but it wasn't a great department. And the opportunity was to take that greatness and try to make it something special. And as Abdullah said, they were really passionate at Stanford of the tripartite mission of excellent clinical care, excellent research, and excellent education. And they wanted to do all three. They didn't want to do one at the expense of the others. And so how does one balance that? There'd also been sort of a bimodal faculty. There was some very senior faculty who had been there for a long time, and there were a lot of junior faculty. But that leaves out a big gap. There were not a lot of mid-career faculty because a lot of people had started their career there and then had moved on. And so there was some morale issues with the faculty. There was some issues with trying to grow, not just grow the faculty, but really nurture the faculty and help them be successful. And so shortly after I got there in 2012, we had a leadership retreat after a series of focus group meetings with a variety of members of the Stanford faculty, both in the Department of Medicine and out. And we had an all-day leadership retreat where we really were going to focus on the three missions. And in the clinical care mission, we were trying to figure out how were we going to develop a clinical service that delivered on quality, safety, cost effectiveness, excellent patient outcomes. All the things that you do so well here was not well done, frankly, at Stanford. We wanted to be in a culture that valued clinical excellence. So I live on a campus where there are 23 living Nobel laureates on campus, including 8 in the School of Medicine. And the pinnacle of success at Stanford is the individual accomplishment of having won a Nobel Prize. And clinical medicine was something that they did not just on campus, but that everybody went off campus for their clinical care. One of the more interesting meetings I went to early in my tenure is that one of the junior faculty members asked me, he said, Bob, ask your division leaders where they get their own personal health care. And I said, well, they must get it at Stanford. And they said, just ask. So I went to my next division chief meeting and I said, where do you get your health care? And they said, all looked at their shoes and nobody would answer. And then as I started asking people, they got it. Kaiser, Palo Alto Medical Foundation. Almost none of them got their health care at Stanford. I said, this is going to change. This is a problem. If you don't think it's good to get your own health care from each other, then we've got a bigger problem than that needs to be addressed. And then we were entering the healthcare system at a time that was really growing, and we wanted to figure out how do we integrate Stanford Hospital data and information to take better care of our patients. We have some of the world's best biomedical informaticists at Stanford, and yet they were doing nothing to solve problems related to Stanford. And so how could we take advantage of that and integrate? On the research mission, it was all about how do we increase the interactions, including interactions around campus. It's a marvelously collaborative and collegial place, and I'll show you some of the things we're doing with joint recruits with different schools, joint recruits with different departments across the university. How do we provide a better clinical research infrastructure? And thank you for sending us Dr. Mahaffey last year, who's having a great time. In fact, I think he's on his way to London today to try to bring more clinical research to Stanford, but that's why he's not here for the weekend. And how do we foster the career growth of our young investigators? On the education front, at some point, Stanford had really, and this is not necessarily just specific to Stanford, it's a problem nationwide, of how do we get medical students to find the excitement in medicine and its associated subspecialties. We graduate about 85 students a year at Stanford, and the average Stanford medical student is there for somewhere between 5 and 6 years. I learned an interesting terminology when I got to Stanford. I'd say, well, you're a first-year student, a second-year student, third-year student. And they would look at it and say, no, that's not how we refer to ourselves here. I'm year 5 of 8, or I'm year 6 of 9. Because there's an amazing group of people who were doing amazing things, but they weren't going into medicine. 80 a year were going into internal medicine. We'll talk about how that's changed. There had been a long-time director of the house staff training program, and clearly the house staff training program needed some revitalization, and I'll show you some of the things we're doing there. And how do we get our faculty excited to be engaged in the training of our young people? And so we've spent a lot of time on that. And wrapped around all those discussions, I said, well, I live here in the Bay Area, so what do we want to make sure we talk about in every single discussion we have? We want to be innovative. We want to be entrepreneurial. We want to be great at what we do. And we want there to be quality, we want to be on the cutting edge, creativity, we want to collaborate, communicate, et cetera. So we were really thinking about how could we take advantage not just of this amazing university that we were at, but this amazing part of the country we were at, and how could we better connect people in the Department of Medicine with people in the greater Silicon Valley area. So where are we over the course of what evolved out of that leadership retreat, a series of working groups, et cetera, with different faculty leaders. This is what I presented this past spring to Stanford Medicine leadership from both the school and the healthcare side. We said that we want to be one of the premier Department of Medicine in the country. We want to be in the top 5. We're currently, and depending upon the rankings that you look at, we're somewhere between 12 and 20. And we wanted to be a top 5 institution. And the challenge for us there is that we're a lot smaller Department of Medicine than many. When I arrived there, we had about 240 faculty in the Department of Medicine. To give you some context, you have over 600 here in the Department of Medicine, and at a place like the Brigham, they have almost 1,100. So we're by design, we've been a small Department of Medicine, but we'll talk about that. We want to deliver high-quality, innovative, team-based care, both being personalized and evidence-based. We want our research to be groundbreaking. We want it to be best in class. And we want both ends of the translational spectrum. We want bench to bedside and bedside to populations. And we'll talk about population health. And we really want to educate and train tomorrow's leaders, both in the science space, but also in the clinical space. And we have some unique interactions on campus with the liberal arts side of the university, and I'll talk about this in our team leadership. We really wanted to structure and not forget the human part of medicine and what it takes to be not just a great scientist, but a great physician who cares for other human beings. So who are we today as a Department of Medicine? We're the largest department in the university. We have 14 divisions. Interesting, 11 of them are the traditional clinical divisions: cardiology, cancer, infectious disease, endocrine, et cetera, primary care. But 3 of them are research divisions. We have a biomedical informatics division. We have 2 health services research divisions. So we have a very eclectic group of people in the department. We'll talk about that. By spring, we had gone from 240 faculty to 322, and as of last week, we had 332 faculty. So we've added about 90 faculty over the course of the last 2 years. So there's been tremendous growth, and it's been really growth across all 3 missions. About 2/3 of those 90 are people who are clinically active. About half of those, that 2/3, so about 1/3 of the faculty that we've hired are people like all of the faculty here who do some research, some clinical work. So we've been trying to balance that. And then we still are hiring heavily into the sciences. You can see the space we occupy, the annual budget. The budget this year will be about $250 million distributed amongst the research, clinical missions. And one of the nice things about living in the Valley is that there's a substantial amount of philanthropic support for our activities as well. And that's reflected in the fact that we have, I think now, almost 30 endowed professors. So about 10% of our faculty in the Department of Medicine hold endowed professorships, which I think is a testament to the generosity of the area. And my predecessors had really run the department with what I would say would be a kitchen cabinet of a couple people that they like to get advice from, but there was no real structure with people having a portfolio of activities that they were responsible for. And maybe it was all the time that I spent with Dr. Califf, but I really thought that what we needed was good old-fashioned matrix management with the leadership across the matrix of the clinical disciplines, coupled with the activities that cut across all of the 3 missions. Some of these people you may know well. Paul Heidenreich, the cardiologist, certainly know. I asked Paul to join us from the Palo Alto VA. He's one of the country's leaders in cardiovascular quality. He's been a tremendous addition. Paul is teamed up with Ann Weinecker, a pulmonologist, is the other side of quality. Paul really is helping deal with the metrics, the analytics, and Ann, who was the former chief of staff for the hospital, is really helping us with implementation and clinical affairs. Ken Mahaffey, you know, is our Vice Chair of Clinical Research. And one of the more interesting people I've met in Palo Alto is the author Abraham Verghese, who is, I've asked him to be the Vice Chair of Education, and really bringing a lot of that humanistic element to the training of physicians. Andy Hoffman is an endocrinologist who's our Vice Chair of Faculty and Academic Affairs. And Jim Kahn is an interesting guy. He came down from UCSF to be the Chief of the Medical Service, same time I did, at the Palo Alto VA. In an attempt to better integrate the VA into Stanford life, we've made Jim the Vice Chair of Veterans Affairs, and he's really trying to increase the integration of the two healthcare systems. And until yesterday, Tom McGrath was our Vice Chair, Director of Finance and Administration. Rob, you'll be interested in knowing Tom is going off to work with Pascal as the new COO of University Health at Miami. So these connections persist. So if there's anybody in finance and administration looking for a job, let me know later. We have 14 divisions, and when I got there, every single division chief was a scientist, a laboratory scientist, except for the health services folks. They were virtually all men, and almost none of them practiced medicine. And so they didn't understand why there were any issues on the in campus, and so we've had the opportunity to begin to change the way that the leadership team looks. So we have 14 divisions, but interestingly at Stanford, and interestingly for cardiology has 2 division chiefs. So we have 14 divisions, but 15 division chiefs. Ray Kim's one of our latest recruits he just came a couple months ago from Mayo Clinic. He's heading up GI and hepatology. Some of you know and have collaborated with Doug Owens, who's our division chief in Alan Garber's old division, primary care and outcomes research. And again, some of you may know Dr. Ioannidis, who is likes to let you know that he's one of the world's most cited scientists. So what have we done since we've been here? I'll go through the 3 missions. I won't talk about each of them, but we've been really busy. We've recruited a lot of people. We've recruited new division chiefs in oncology, GI, and rheumatology. The inpatient and outpatient volume clinically, we continue to grow. Just before I got there, we were approximately a $2 billion healthcare system. We're now up to about a $3 billion healthcare system. But before I got there were 7 clinical FTEs doing primary care in the entire system. And so when you ask yourself why didn't people get their care at Stanford, it's because there's nobody to get care from. So over the course of the last couple of years, one of the things we've done with Mark Cullen's help, our leader of general internal medicine and family medicine, is we've been expanding what we do in primary care, including wrapping health services around that and implementation research with some really interesting recruits. We're growing our hospitalist faculty. We're trying to more and more integrate with the Palo Alto VA. And there's been one of the really great things about Stanford, as I said, is collaboration, collegiality. We have a really interesting set of multi-specialty, multidisciplinary activities that's been very fun to see it develop. And finally, something I'll talk about, the University Healthcare Alliance has been moving from a campus-centric activity to really thinking about ourselves as a regional healthcare delivery system with something called the University Healthcare Alliance, or on the pediatric side, Packard Children's Healthcare Alliance. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, of how we've been able to grow both clinically and academically through those 2 entities. Research is really, the bedrock of the department has been laboratory science, largely funded through the NIH, health services research, largely funded through the NIH, the VA, PCORI, and others. Despite the NIH funding scene being dismal the last few years, the department has at least held its own, even grown a little bit. And if you look just on the NIH front, we're actually not doing bad. We have a tremendously talented young group of faculty now who are building research careers in infectious disease, cardiology, hematology, oncology, immunology, which have really been some of the traditional strengths of Stanford. We have a fabulous group of people now doing translational scientists, and I'll show you some of the work. One of our young assistant professors, Ravi Medici, working in translational hematology and some of the things he's doing, including some very innovative approach to treating people with advanced cancer. We've just recruited 2 young people to build a translational science program around intensive care medicine. And as you know, Ken Mahaffey joined us to help really elevate the amount of work we're doing in clinical research. Based on my DCRI background, you would expect that I would be very much in favor of increasing the amount of quantitative science done within the department, and we have done that in collaboration with main campus as well as other departments within the school to really bolster our informatics research. We've hired 5 or 6 new informatics faculty members into the department. We've hired almost 10 new biostatisticians into the department. We're doing joint recruits with the university and the economics department. We now have 3 MD, PhD economists who are part of the department. We have joint recruits with the law school, with the business school, with the VA, with a variety of people. The whole point being to try to take advantage of the excellence on Stanford's campus and really try to take advantage of the fact that it's a very quantitative campus. About a third of the Stanford undergrads get either an engineering or a computer science degree. Think about that. It is a very, very quantitative place, and the strength on campus is extraordinary. At the same time, the health services research, there's been outstanding health services research, but it's not been well coordinated. In fact, there's been pockets of excellence, but people have not necessarily worked together. The Population Health Science Initiative that we'll talk about has been an opportunity to do that. Like a lot of other universities, like Duke, back in the 70s when nursing schools were closed, Stanford had a nursing school, closed its nursing school a number of years ago. We're now partnering with the chief nursing officer of the healthcare system to bring nursing scientists into the department. So we now have 5 nursing scientists, nurse PhDs within the Department of Medicine doing implementation research at the healthcare system, and we intend to continue to grow that. Education, under Abraham's leadership, we're now seeing a resurgence. I said we had sort of naded out with 8 Stanford medical students of our class of '85 applying to internal medicine. We now have about 25 a year applying to internal medicine, and I think that reflects the commitment of Abraham and others to really growing that. We've now, at the medical student request, one of our faculty leaders leads a primary care interest group and has launched a Future of Primary Care seminar series. Some of you may be familiar with Abraham's work in bedside medicine, and I'll show you some of that from the Stanford Medicine 25. Just a lot of different things that we've been able to do to really quickly try to get the culture thinking differently about research and education. I've talked to Rob about this. Some of you might be interested in knowing that we've, last year when our interns showed up on the first day they were there, we randomized them into a clinical trial where we tested 2 different methods of end-of-life conversation teachings. And all that, and we use simulated patients as the baseline partway through the year, and then at the end of the year to understand whether or not one educational modality was better than another. The data are being examined now, and we should be having that shortly. This year, we've randomized them to 2 different strategies of having cost information available to them when they're ordering laboratories in the electronic health record. The residency program now continues to improve. This past year, we had a great residency match, roughly half men, half women. Really interesting, and I think reflective of the Bay Area. 44% of our interns were born outside the United States. And they were really, truly born all over the globe, and I think it really reflects our interest in trying to make it a very diverse residency program. What are we going to continue to do over the course of the coming couple of years? We're definitely moving more and more towards trying to understand how to deliver care in an accountable care organization model. We've really marshaled the forces of our health services researchers, people like Arnie Milstein, to help us at the care delivery interface try to understand not just how we do it, but how we measure it and report on it, and think about it from an academic perspective as well as a practical perspective. In fact, our CEO of the hospital, Amir Rubin, who is just a wonderful, I'll call him a wonderful young leader. He's the CEO of a $3 billion system at age 44. And he's been saying to me regularly, Bob, how do I get some of these smart people here on your faculty to turn their attention to my problems? Well, again, something I learned here at DCRI, and I think I'm paraphrasing Rob, who says money is the great chemoattractant of academic medicine. Well, I said, Amir, if you put some money on the table, people will come. So he's put a substantial amount of money on the table, and now we have a grants program for Stanford people to attack Stanford healthcare problems. Culture of quality, working on this, working with the ABIM around their choosing wisely perspective, and really around this whole time, trying to increase the integration with both translation and clinical research, including clinical trials. On the research front, we really want to be the best in everything from discovery science up through population health. We're recruiting a faculty leader in translational science. We think that we have someone on the way that we'll announce soon, and we clearly intend to grow our translational medicine efforts, particularly being in the Bay Area where it's easy to tap into the incubators of innovation, the accelerators, the venture capital community who are very interested in what we do. We want to partner with DCRI. What we're really focusing on, what Ken's focusing on from a coordinating center perspective is really the data sciences. And we're collaborating with large parts of the campus outside of the School of Medicine on that. And we're looking very much at how do we, Kaiser is certainly the dominant healthcare delivery group in our area. Why are people deciding to join Stanford in a healthcare system? In part because they want to participate in the research and education mission that is Stanford. And so one of Ken's other jobs is he's leading the initiative along with a scientist from the Department of Pediatrics to really think about how do we create a regional network of our hundreds of providers for research and education. I'll show you a little bit more of that. On the education front, we really, under Abraham's leadership, are really making sure that we're training not just great physician scientists, but really doctors who are imbued with humanistic values. We want our young faculty to be educators, and Abraham, largely working with the group of young hospitalists, has begun to create a group in bedside medicine who are really dedicated to teaching bedside medicine, learning about bedside medicine, and studying that and writing on it. And he has a series of interesting collaborations with our Department of Anthropology on campus, trying to understand how do you measure what a doctor actually does in terms of the doctor-patient relationship. So really interesting things there. We're increasing our clinician investigative pathway within our residency program, and we have a lot of young faculty with K-23s, the entry award from the NIH. We had actually, for the size of our faculty, reflecting that we were short on mid-career faculty. We don't have a lot of people with the mentorship awards. And so one of the things we're doing is increasing the pool of that group of faculty. And as I said, reflective of the Bay Area, we're very interested in diversity, and we think we're making good strides towards that in our residency program. So as I said, when I got there, we were 240 faculty. We're up to, last week, 332. By the end of fiscal year 15, our fiscal year starts in September. We should be up close to 370. You can see we'll be adding 30, 40, 50 faculty a year, at least for the foreseeable future. Again, still leaving us not a big Department of Medicine. As I said, a place like the Brigham's 1,000 faculty will never be that big. We're space constrained by being on the university campus, but we're also beginning to look at how do we increase our relationships with the community, and I'll talk a bit more about that. So let me first talk about Stanford Healthcare. I see Jeff Rubin, a former Stanford guy, sitting in the middle of the crowd. When Jeff was at Stanford until about 2 weeks ago, SHC stood for Stanford Hospital and Clinics, which really reflected its focus on a hospital and some clinics. In fact, I jokingly would say to the chief of cardiology, I'd say, why is it that the only place you can see a Stanford cardiology is on the second floor of Stanford Hospital? And I didn't mean it in a nice way. It's that our patients want to be able to see people throughout the region. And so 2 weeks ago, it was announced that we've changed the name of SHC to Stanford Healthcare, which really reflects, I think, the broader vision. The vision of the healthcare system is healing humanity through science and compassion, one patient at a time, reflecting that notion that we want to be best at science, but we also want to be a place that cares about people, the mission being to care, educate, and discover. Again, so at the healthcare system level, it's been made very explicit that we're an academic medical center that has the tripartite mission, and that our CEO of the hospital passionately talks about our being an academic place. A couple of years ago, when Stanford was fortunate to have 2 Nobel laureates in the same week, we happened to be in a meeting with the clinical chairs and the CEO of the hospital, and he was smiling, and somebody said, Amir, why are you smiling? Has it been a good week? He said, it's been a great week. People are always asking me, what's different from Stanford, from Kaiser, from Sutter, from the other places in the area? And he says, and now I say, I don't know, how many Nobel Prizes did you win this week? It's great to hear that coming out of the mouth of a hospital CEO and executive. So what we're interested in at Stanford is to do everything from what's been called the leading edge of complex care down through really population health. And so what we're really concentrating on is the complex care delivery within a tertiary quaternary system, creating a local network of care through regional affiliation, starting to build our accountable care capabilities. For the first time this year, we've launched an accountable care insurance product, largely now only offered to Stanford employees. Now you'd say, well, that's a small step in the water. 4 years ago, Stanford University almost put a Kaiser clinic on the Stanford campus because they had no faith that the medical school could actually deliver care to its own employees, and that's totally changing. In the first year, we signed up over 10,000 of the employees to be part of the Stanford Accountable Care, and it's allowed us to study the Stanford University population and virtual care, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. So the network of care, over the course of the last couple of years, we've added 500 providers through the affiliates, 300 on the pediatric side, 200 on the adult side. They're spread throughout the Bay Area. Those of you who know your San Francisco geography, you can see San Francisco with a presence even there in San Francisco where UCSF is. But we're really concentrating on the South Bay, where we are in the Mid-Peninsula down to San Jose, and then over in the East Bay. And the growth of the population is really in the East Bay, and the growth of the technology companies is actually over to the East Bay as well, in part because of the open land, the better housing prices, land prices, et cetera. But you can see that we're really starting to spread throughout the South and East Bay. We're opening up this coming year a large multi-specialty area down in the South Bay. We're opening one in the East Bay, and we'll be opening another one up in the North Bay shortly, up in the Sonoma region. My favorite place to go. For accountable care, we have the Stanford Healthcare Alliance. This is our accountable care organization. A lot of it is driven by dashboards. Kevin and Rob have both been out to visit us and have talked with some of the leadership in something called Stanford Coordinated Care, which is taking that sickest group of people within the Stanford healthcare system, the 5 to 10% of people who account for 40 to 50% of the cost in your system, and trying to create new models of care. And while we do that, constantly studying it. So we have a health services researcher that I know some of you know by the name of Steve Ash. He's located out of the VA, who's created as part of his research group something we're calling the Evaluative Science Unit, or ESU, where he is formally contracted to Stanford to actually help us study some of these implementation projects. On virtual care, we're fortunate to be in an area where there's a lot of high tech. We're partnering with a lot of those tech companies to provide for them both on-site health care. For example, we have a group of primary care providers now down in San Diego who provide the on-site care for Qualcomm. We're the healthcare providers for the 49ers and the Warriors. I'm still trying to figure out how we can get the Red Sox in on this one, but I've not been successful yet. From virtual care, I was telling Zubin this morning, now in our ACO model, particularly for healthy young people, we're asking them if they would like a virtual primary care provider, and that what that is that there will be a group of providers who will see people over the internet through video conferencing over the phone, and you'll sign up for a virtual provider who will you'll be able to see whenever you want them, 24/7, whenever the need strikes you that you need to talk to your healthcare provider. Primary care, again, when I got there, we had 7 primary care providers for our system. We now have a lot more than that. And we're really looking at it thinking that people need to have different types of care and different models of care. And again, it's constantly being studied. So we have off-site care in the community. We have Stanford Coordinated Care. We have our academic practices on campus in a beautiful new building in what's called the Hoover, where both Stanford Internal Medicine and Stanford Family Practice are collaborating to teach our medical students in new delivery models, our residents, et cetera. We have the workplace-based healthcare, which we've talked about. We have a concierge and executive practice and senior care. And across all of this, we're trying to coordinate social services, health education, mental health, pharmacy. Great deal of effort going into this and trying to figure out how do we offer this in a way that we take advantage of all the great things that are on campus. One of the things is, again, the strength of the informatics group. And so Stanford Coordinated Care, this is our sickest group of people, and really trying to understand their risks so that we can offer them the best care possible. Most of this care is not delivered by physicians. Most of this care is delivered by social workers, by pharmacists, by nurses, etc. And some of you know this. Zubin's been involved with this. Eric's been involved with this. Mike McConnell at our place has a pilot program called the Cardinal Commitment, which is really trying to help our cardiovascular patients with prevention. And it's using a host of mobile health delivery technologies, a lot of it from startups in the area, and really trying to help the larger community deal with different modes of delivery of healthcare. This one being utilizing a lot of the wearable devices, the sensors, et cetera, and partnering with these startups to help us do that. Well, as I said, one of the real fun things to be there has been a chance to re-engage with residents. During most of my time at Duke, I hung out with fellows, which has been fabulous. But I'd really forgotten what it was like to hang out with interns and residents and how interesting they are. Anybody know the structure that we're sitting in front of? The gates of hell. It's very, very appropriate. The house staff like to get their pictures taken in front of Rodin's Gates of Hell. This is in the Rodin Garden, which is at the Art Museum, which is just across the street from my office. So this is our residency program last year. We have about 120 residents in our program. We have a global health track. We have a clinical investigative path. This is mostly for the training of physician scientists. This predominantly had been for basic scientists. Over the last couple of years, we're now attracting residents into this pathway. We're interested in health services, interested in outcomes research, interested in clinical research. We now have one of the country's first medicine anesthesia combined program. There's 3 of them in the country. This will be a 5-year program where they'll be eligible for board certification in both medicine and anesthesia. We have more than 50 rotations offered across 3 hospitals. So our residents really get to see tertiary quaternary care. Increasingly, they're at the VA to see the Veterans Affairs healthcare system. We're associated with a county hospital, Santa Clara County Hospital, and now as we acquire the community hospital, one of my charges has been to build an academic service line at that hospital, which will include a part of our residency training at that. We're also starting to send our residents out into the University Healthcare Alliance sites. And we just started a rotation last month where a group of our residents go up every month to the largest practice in Oakland, where they can see real ambulatory care in the community. Some of you know Michelle Berry, who's a close colleague of Mike Merson from when they were both together at Yale, and she's brought a lot of her expertise and programs from Yale to help build our global health opportunities. Abraham Verghese and his young hospitalists in bedside medicine hold hands-on session to teach the physical examination on a regular basis called the Stanford 25, which are 25 physical examination techniques that one ought to be proficient with. As Abraham will tell you, this is not because these are the 25 things you have to know, but what he's trying to get people to think about is you should have some body of knowledge around the physical exam that you feel good at, that you can teach, and that he uses it as an entree to teach at the bedside. It's been very interesting. As I told you, we're doing a randomized clinical trial this past year. We're doing another one this year with our interns, and I think that they're having fun doing it. At least they haven't told me they weren't having fun. If you got your iPad with you, download the app for the Stanford 25, and you can follow Abraham and Errol Azaga and a few others to see what they're doing with regard to the Stanford Medicine 25. You're nobody at Stanford unless you design your own app, so I'm still trying to get in on this gig. It's an amazing place in terms of the culture of the Valley and being able to get innovative, creative people together. StartX was an incubator, accelerator started by a group of Stanford undergraduates, really designed to help Stanford faculty and staff start companies, to understand the pitfalls of that. One of our young residents, Connie Chen, after her internship, she took a break from her internship. She's a MIT-trained engineer because she wanted to help start StartX Med, which is the part of StartX dealing with the medical side of campus. In her first year, she helped 6 Stanford faculty members start a company. When I met with her at the end of the summer and said, well, you're coming back next year? She said, oh no, I've gotten so excited, I'm starting my own company now. So I'm sitting on the board of her company. In full disclosure, it's a mobile health technology company. She's an example of the kind of young people on campus. What are we doing in the translation and clinical research space? We're collaborating with you a lot, that's for sure. But we're also trying to take advantage of what the strength is at Stanford, which should be translation, given the type of excellence we have on campus. We have a group of the oncologists led by Dean Felsher, who have really created a fabulous program over the last couple of years called TRAM. This is really to introduce young people to more senior people, to help them think about translational medicine, and to help them partner with people on the clinical side, with people in the laboratory that they might not otherwise know about. It's been really successful. We give out a series of pilot grants a year. We send them to workshops. We have mentoring sessions. And I think that this has helped us tremendously in terms of increasing the engagement between our basic scientists, our laboratory scientists, and our young clinicians. One of the first projects that we're most excited about, it's going into first in patients over the course of the next couple of weeks, is something that came out of Ravi Majeti and Irv Weissman's laboratory, looking at a novel way of treating patients with very advanced cancer by targeting what's been called the don't eat me signal of CD47. This is a signal that cancer cells set out that prohibit them or decrease the likelihood that they're going to be phagocytosed or eaten by the immune system. What they've figured out at Stanford is how to create antibodies against CD47, and now have gone through a whole series of steps to finally, just a couple weeks ago, the first patients have actually been treated in our collaborations with Oxford, with AML and other advanced solid tumors, and we have our first trial underway in our outpatient GCR, what was the GCRC, beautiful new building to do clinical and translational research, just starting last month. Some of you know Joe Wu. Joe Wu likes to talk about, creating your heart in a petri dish. And this, you talk about translation. Joe has grown his own heart. He has it sitting there in his laboratory beating away. And now what they're doing is they're entering into a series of experiments to understand things like QT prolongation of different drugs before you actually test them in human beings. So this has been a big shift in thinking in regenerative medicine. And a project that we have Adrian and Eric and others to thank for collaborating with one of our young faculty member, Josh Knowles, who has become a real leader in the area of familial hyperlipidemia. This is a small group of people, but from a total global perspective, a large group of people who have genetically determined high lipids, putting them at risk for early onset of cardiovascular disease. And he could not have done this without the help from the DCRI, and in particular with Adrian and Eric, really helping him think through how do you create a registry. And this is an interesting registry because the patients are going to enter their data into this registry. And so thank you for the help with this. Some of you know Stanford is really in part known for its engineering prowess. Paul York, who's a member of the Department of Medicine and Cardiology, Todd Britton, a mid-career interventional cardiologist, have led a very successful program, a joint effort between the School of Medicine and the School of Engineering, in something called biodesign, run out of the bioengineering department. This is really the question is, can you teach people to invent? Can you teach people to innovate? And Paul, over the last decade, has really created a rigorous method around this. There's a new biodesign book coming out. This is the last version. And this is a partial list as of about a year ago of the companies that were started by young people in the biodesign program. One that the cardiologists may be familiar with is iRhythm. This was a young Stanford electrophysiologist, engineer, who created an alternative to the Holter monitor. A little patch that's about the size of a Band-Aid that you put on the chest. You record the heart rhythm for 2 weeks. And they got the lesson from Netflix. You put it in an envelope and mail it back in, and your heart rhythm is monitored. This same guy is also working with Rob, Adrian, and a few others on a new technology of a non-implantable defibrillator using the same adhesive technology in a little company called Element Science. Jillian, as well as others here, have done training under Alan Garber and Doug Owen and I think one of our real premier health services groups within the department, the Center for Primary Care Outcomes Research, led by Doug Owen. And this has been really an interesting area because it allows us to really cross the campus in many ways. We've done 2 joint recruits with the Department of Economics. We've now done 2 joint recruits with the law school, and we're beginning to really assemble a multidisciplinary group interested in quantitative research on health policy. Great relationships, and increasingly great relationships with the VA. Mintu Tarakia is one of our young cardiologists, predominantly based at the VA, who's been working in the VA healthcare system using VA data to try to understand different questions, and I know a lot of you know that. Rob has been very helpful in working with Harry Greenberg over the years as Stanford has put forward their Clinical and Translational Science Award. I got there in the summer of 2012 when Harry was writing the renewal. We did quite well in the renewal, and what it's allowed us to do is really think about clinical and translational research from the perspective of the campus. And our CTSA is not just in the School of Medicine. In fact, it's an independent Stanford-wide initiative which has some relevance for things like population health. So one of the things that's been exciting to me in joining the campus there is really being able to think about research in the population health space and really utilizing the backbone of Spectrum across the campus. We've collected a group of about 300 interested faculty on campus from a lot of different disciplines, including things like sociology, demography, psychology, and really trying to bring all of these people together to answer important questions regarding populations, very broadly defined. We launched this about a year ago in the Population Health Science Colloquium. We're expecting about 75 to 100 people to maybe show up. We had to shut down registration when we got to over 300, which I think really reflected the interest on campus. Stanford is definitely not thought of in this area, but yet we had all the people on campus. Amy Abernathy was recently out as a distinguished professor and visiting as part of the lecture series in population health, and we're hopeful that as Amy moves to this next part of her life with Flatiron, who's going to be opening up an office out in San Francisco, she tells me that we can begin to further that collaboration, not just with them, but also back here through the Duke Cancer Institute where Amy had been. A lot of interesting work going on in informatics on campus. Nigam Shah is an assistant professor doing some really interesting work on text mining in the electronic health record, and he's written a whole series of papers, including a whole series of methodologic papers. I was fortunate to collaborate with him and Chris Longhurst, the lead informatician for the pediatric hospital, to talk about using aggregated patient data at the point of care. I saw Dan in the back, Rob up front. You'll be pleased to know that one of the first papers referenced in this paper is Gene Stead's Way of the Future back in 1972. So we're finally trying to put some of the things in place about being able to get aggregated, adjusted patient data at the point of care. Whole genome sequencing, this paper was in JAMA from a group of people within internal medicine a couple months ago when we're starting to get whole genome sequencing on a group of Stanford patients and really trying to understand what does that mean from a science perspective, what does it mean from a clinical decision-making perspective, what does it mean from an informatics perspective, because the amount of work that goes into this is extraordinary. Mark Cullen has brought to us expertise from Yale in a different dimension of population health, and that's the workplace. He's worked with Alcoa for a number of years and trying to understand their workforce. We're now applying these same models to some of the other companies in our area and trying to understand them not just as a place where we provide health care, but we study as a population. We're just launching a series of strategic programs with Santa Clara County. Santa Clara County is an amazingly diverse area. It's one of the largest counties in the country of almost 2 million people. It's thought of as being one of the wealthiest counties in the country because of things like Google and Facebook, but it also has some incredible areas of poverty, has a high immigrant group of people with about 50% of the households in Santa Clara County having come from outside the U.S. and having English as a second language. We're launching a project to understand how do we do massive screening and treatment for hepatitis B, where we have a huge problem in Santa Clara County with all the attendant consequences of hepatitis. Ken Mahaffey and Jason Wong from Pediatrics have been working in the packaged children, Healthcare Alliance, University Healthcare Alliance, to really think about how do we build an integrated research and education network. This is going to involve about 500 providers throughout the region, and Ken and Jason have been leading this, and we're just going through the funding issues for this right now at the school. More to come on this, but I think that this will give us an opportunity to really study our regional community. So, what have I learned in the Department of Medicine? Huge opportunities, and they were across all mission areas, and they were very clear when I went there that they didn't want to sacrifice one mission at the expense of another. But as part of our success, we know part of that is we have to grow our clinical presence. We had been a small footprint in Northern California. Now we need to grow that. We're growing primary care. That's going to be foundational, but we want to do it in a different sort of way, and we're looking at a lot of different models, and we're constantly testing them about how that might be. We need to figure out how to coordinate with our community. Basic science strengths are deep and many, and we think that our ability to connect the basic science to the clinical arena is going to be is really going to be one of the keys to our success. We've talked about population health and the ACO. We're also talking about creating a learning healthcare system, which we think should be the cornerstone of what we do, and really be the cornerstone of who we are as a university, given the extraordinary quantitative and computer expertise on campus. And now I just want to take a minute or two to tell you what I've really been doing out there. That shortly after I left, a number of you in the room were at the wedding of our daughter. This is me dancing with her. For those of you who are Red Sox fans, she surprised me and played Sweet Caroline for the Dod Data dance, and so that was fabulous. And this is my lovely wife, who's in the front row here. Most of you know Rhonda. This is Rhonda sitting seaside in Sausalito on a Sunday, maybe Sunday brunch, I'll say, toasting with her mimosa. But I want you to know that she's still a good Southern girl. And when we went to the Pumpkin Festival, she is eating a corn dog. So it's not just mimosas out there in California. But this is the world's largest pumpkin festival in Half Moon Bay. And she was so excited the first day she got there and she realized that they had corn dogs. The two youngest have become part of the Stanford campus. They think this is great to come out and visit Northern California. This is Mackenzie and Aaron. Aaron graduated from Duke a year ago. Mackenzie graduated from Lafayette College this past year. And this is them at the Rose Bowl. They've been having a good time. You can see they've gotten into bike riding in the Bay. And I had to give them credit for their engineering prowess. They went up to CVS and they came back with bungee cords and a case of Corona Light on their bike. We've gotten into Stanford Athletics. There was never a football team here. I thought we'd go west. We have a great football team. Duke now has a football team. We've made friends, as you see, with people in the athletic department. This was Rhonda's birthday at the UCLA game, and they put this message up, which was nice of them to do. Now, some of you know that I had a bad accident a year ago, but you can see that it didn't deter me. Rob thinks I did it to stay home and watch the Red Sox. It was only coincident that it was around the time of the World Series. But I was in rough shape for a few days. You can see my cast, which I was supposed to be in this constant upward position for a while. It was really tough sitting out there on the porch. But some good medical things have happened too. This is our daughter who got married a couple years ago. She's having our first grandchild later this month. This is Kaylin Scott. They live actually within a block of the Caliph's son in Washington Park in Denver, which has been fun. Now we've kept the friendships and the collaboration. You can probably identify the guy with the stash. Who came standing under the Stanford Medicine Big Data Conference, and it's been fun. Now, a lot of you have come to campus, more of you that Dan's been out. Kevin comes out frequently. We'd love to have more and more of you come out to visit. This was a great conference on big data and biomedicine. Our friend Valentin Fuster, this is him with our chief residents last year. He had dinner with the chief residents, and the next day I said, "How was it?" He said, "Robert, I'm exhausted. They knew more about me than I know." And so they really had a fun time with Val as our first chief resident visiting professor. We have all kinds of visitors. This is Chris O'Connor came out and visited with Rhonda and I and our kids. And then all of a sudden we're at the Rose Bowl, and those of you who recognize this guy in the front, that's Chris's oldest son who now lives in San Francisco, and he found us at the Rose Bowl last year, and it was good to see him, and we've run into the O'Connors a few times out there. The cardiologists know who this is. This is only Ralph Brindis would go to a game and wear a Got Wine hat. I should have brought him a Red Sox hat, but this was over in Oakland a few weeks ago at one of the A's game, and yes, the park did not get much more crowded than this, despite them having a fabulous team there, but I was there in full Red Sox regalia. It was a good time. We still have our passion for Duke and the friends that we've met here. This is Summer and Marcia Covington, and this was in Cameron last year at the UNC game. Rhonda and I flew back for that, so we remain having our true blue identity. But Rhonda's also really gotten into the lifestyle of Northern California. She started riding horses about a year and a half ago. You'd say, well, did she ride horses before? I said, well, when she was a kid, but my wife, of course, being a hyper-competitive person, riding wasn't good enough. She soon started competing, and this is Rhonda competing in one of the horse shows. And of course, just competing's not good enough. My wife has to win, and so this is one of her early prizes when she wanted. I think this was the Woodside Horse Show. We have a great view from our deck. Some of you have been to the house, so if this is enticing to any of you who want to come visit us, we're at 1,800 feet. We look out on the San Francisco Bay. That's the Santa Cruz Mountains across the way with the fog coming in at night. Great sunsets every night. Really a beautiful place. This is a view of the campus, again, looking up at the mountains from the football stadium. So a great place to visit again. There's a theme here. If you want to come out and some of those people I got to hire. I'm also having fun with people on campus. And me, we're checking out my Google Glasses. I couldn't let Dr. Caleb be the only guy up here with Google Glasses. So this was with the guy that ran the Google Glass section of Google, and it was a lot of fun. Very interesting to wear these things. But of course, many of you know that Rhonda and I traveled with a large wine collection out to California, but now we get invited to parties like this where people bottle wine in their yard. And this is me bottling a 3-liter Magnum of Pinot Noir at our friend Julio's house. That was a lot of fun. And so we said, well, if we go to other people's house, couldn't we do that at our own house? And so this was our yard a couple years ago, about 18 months ago. The field was torn up. We thought we're going to plant some grapes here. This is the posting. We begin to plant. Our good friend now, Julio, who manages the vineyard at Fogarty Vineyard, has been helping us out. And Julio planted 400 and something plants on a Saturday morning. Had all the trellising and all of that. We've planted Pinot Noir, Cabernet, Merlot. And look at the growth just this past year. It's been fantastic to see this on our property. And here we were at the first harvest. A couple weeks ago, we had to get up early in the morning because Julio said, look, the sugars are high. We got to pick first thing in the morning. So the next morning, Rhonda and I were up at 5:36 a.m. picking grapes. Now, you'd say, how long did that take you? About 15 minutes. So we don't have that much, but it was fun. Here's our Pinot Noir. So those of you who are on my sign up for my wine club, I'll be glad to send you some, but should be quite good. And the final one is, I hope you noticed, Michael Sledge, you noticed the swag that I've got on there. I've got on my DCRI fleece vest. So we may be in California, we may be making wine. We crushed it that day, and we'll be making some wine this year, but my heart's still at DCRI. Had my fleece vest on, and I'll stop with that. Thank you. And I left 2 minutes for Dr. Caleb's question.
I've got to start off with Rob.
I'm sure somebody else has a question.
I see him all the time.
Let's let others go. I'll answer last.
So Chris, this also may not be an easy one, but I remember you saying that departments of medicine were anachronistic.
It should be abolished.
And should be abolished, and now you're running one. And a big part of the problem, I think, as I recall, was lack of kind of ability to align funds flow. And I'm wondering, what have you been able to do at Stanford to kind of change that into a way where you're obviously incredibly excited and productive now at these interdisciplinary, kind of pulling people together across different missions. And how do you do that if the money is stuck in one place?
So it's funny you say that, Chris, because when I interviewed, they had a town hall meeting to ask the chair candidates questions. And it's both the good and the bad that I say a lot of things in public. And somebody asked me that very question. They said, Dr. Harrington, we were searching you on the internet. We came across something where you said that departments were anachronistic and ought to be abolished. Do you want to explain? And I said, well, you have to put it in context. I said, first off, think about the position that I sit in. I'm an institute director. I said, but what I mean by that, and I said, if you read the rest of what I said, it's that departments, if you think of departments in the siloed sort of way, they should be abolished. I said, what I hope to bring to the job as a department chair is the mindset of an institute director. Institutes, and Eric and Rob know this better than anyone, is that an institute director has to collaborate with everybody because you have to appoint faculty, you have to have people on the clinical side of the house, you have to have people doing other things, and so you have to collaborate. And one of the great things about Stanford is your ability to cross boundaries and collaborate, and the funds flow models become very fungible across those boundaries. But you have to spend the energy to build those relationships to collaborate. And so Stanford has been a place, I think, because of its smallness, that we can do that. We also, on the clinical side, we have an incredibly transparent and very clear funds flow model with the hospital. And so it's highly predictable as the monies that come from the healthcare system back over to the school. But maybe more importantly, Chris, is that the relationships are such that if you have good ideas still predominate at Stanford. And if you can make a case for good ideas, there's even more opportunity for investment in a lot of these programs that are coming. So the healthcare system, along with the school, specifically the Department of Medicine, we're going to be investing actually a lot of money into creating an academic service line in the East Bay, where we will utilize the East Bay as our beachhead for all this UHA, PCHA stuff. And what we're hoping to do is create an implementation laboratory over there for community-based research. So I think it's relationships, it's collegiality, it's a willingness to collaborate. And something I learned here is that you don't have to get credit for everything if the job is getting done. And I'm happy to let a lot of other people get credit for things as long as we're getting stuff done.
Bob, would you comment on the relationship you have with the Department of Cardiac Surgery, which historically has been very strong there, but not very collaborative?
Yeah, so the good news is that shortly after I got there, a search was announced for a new chair of cardiothoracic surgery. And fortunately, I was able to insinuate myself onto the search committee. And fortunately, I was able to help recruit one of my good friends, Joe Wu, from the University of Pennsylvania. And so Joe has been a great partner, and we're already beginning to see the yield of that as we collaborate across medicine and CT surgery. And my goal is to help Joe grow what he does. And in part, we have to do that because he wants us to grow primary care and cardiology because that's going to benefit him. And so no, that relationship has been great. We even, this is the area of when you say, you got to make friendships and negotiate. Joe needed a bunch of space for his own personal laboratory. We gave him medicine space so that he would have that and allow him to build in the hopes that that would help our relationship down the road. But he's been fabulous. He got on campus about 6 months ago, and he's just I don't know if you know Joe from Penn. He's really terrific.
I got a couple. First of all, this is a great summary of a lot of accomplishments in a short period of time. So congratulations for that. The two questions are, you're sitting there in the hotbed of creative new companies, and you must have thought a lot about what a porous academic industry environment would look like. I've noted in my trips out there that Stanford, although it's in the middle of this, it has a few issues in navigating that. We're in the middle of a big one now where both institutions have issues, but maybe a little bit of where you think things are headed, or should academia stay more siloed and then interact through company formation with outsiders? Then the zinger is, if you were trying to convince your next door neighbor to come to Stanford instead of Kaiser for routine health care, do you really think that there's any reason they should go to Stanford? You're more expensive and lower quality, aren't you?
Actually, the second part's not true. Did we used to be more expensive and lower quality? Absolutely. That's not the case anymore. In fact, if you follow the Kaiser pricing, Kaiser just sort of lurks behind everybody else and gradually increases their prices. Kaiser's no cheaper than anybody else, but what Kaiser is great at is delivering coordinated primary care. And if my neighbor wants to go to Kaiser, I would have no quarrel with that. What I do tell them, as long as you have no health problems, it's a good place. That they're outstanding at primary and secondary care. It's when you get up to the more complicated care. In fact, we under contract handle a lot of their complex care. We handle their transplants. We handle their bone marrow transplants. We handle a lot of their advanced cancer care, a lot of their advanced heart failure care, et cetera. So I have no quarrel with people going to Kaiser, just they'll come see us eventually. And then on the other side about industry academia interactions, as you know, there's been a lot written, including in the New York Times, about the blurring of the boundaries between Stanford and Silicon Valley. I think it's actually a good thing of the blurring of the boundaries, as you might imagine. A lot of great ideas coming out of the university. We have a CEO of the hospital who's investing in things like StartX Med. The president's office is investing in StartX. The Department of Medicine, we're actually bringing over from the hospital a faculty member to help us head up innovation and strategy. And part of the goal for her is to help us build more relationships with Silicon Valley. So no, I want to see more of these relationships, not less. And part of it, Rob, as you know well, is the practical issue of you can't run an academic medical center if you think you're going to run it on the NIH dime, you're 15 years too late, and you've got to be able to figure out diverse forms of funding, et cetera. And for us, that's been really good. So, we want more of those relationships, not less. The conflict issues, well, have to be dealt with and talked about, but I think they can be managed.
Great. In the interest of time, we'll end it there. Dr. Harrington's going to be meeting with a number of people. Thank you so much. And
Thanks for having me.
congratulations.